Anne Ming knew her daughter the way only a mother can. Not through grand declarations or milestone moments, but through the small, unspoken grammar of daily life. She knew Julie left her shoes by the door, never on the rack. She knew Julie's kitchen counter always carried a thin film of crumbs. She knew the bed was never made. These were not flaws. They were signatures. The quiet evidence of a young woman living at full speed, raising a toddler alone, delivering pizzas through the dark hours of Teesside, navigating a separation from her husband Andrew, and still finding time to laugh on the phone with her mom every single morning. On the 16th of November, 1989, that phone call never came. Anne tried Julie's number at 7:30. It rang out. She tried again 10 minutes later. Then again. Julie was supposed to appear in court that morning to finalize her separation. She would not have missed it. This was a woman building a new life for herself and her 2-year-old son. Kevin. She had plans. She had momentum. She would not have simply dissolved into silence. Anne drove to Grange Avenue in Billingham with Julie's brother. The house stood quiet, every door locked, every window sealed. They broke in through the back, and what Anne found inside did not comfort her. It terrified her. The house was spotless, surfaces wiped clean, carpets undisturbed. The bed, Julie's bed, the one she never once bothered to make, was tucked and folded with almost surgical precision. Julie's coat hung on its hook. Her bag sat untouched. Her belongings remained exactly where a person would leave them if they intended to return in minutes. But Julie herself was nowhere. Anne called Cleveland police immediately. She reported her daughter missing. She described the locked doors, the untouched belongings, the eerie tidiness that felt like a message written in absence. The officer on the other end listened politely, and then he offered a theory that would haunt Anne for years to come. Julie had probably gone to London. Young women do that sometimes, he explained. They walk away from their lives. They start over somewhere new. Anne knew this was wrong with every instinct she possessed. Julie would never leave Kevin. She would never disappear without a word. She would never abandon a court date she herself had requested, and she would certainly never, under any circumstances, make her own bed with hospital corners. But the police had their theory, and a theory, once it takes root inside an institution, is a remarkably difficult thing to pull out. The days bleed forward. Anne kept calling the station. Morning, afternoon, night. Each time, the response carried the same shape. Polite acknowledgement, followed by institutional stillness. Julie Hogg was a 22-year-old woman from a working-class estate on Teesside. She was not the kind of missing person who generated headlines or mobilized task forces. She was, in the eyes of those with the power to search, the kind of woman who probably chose to vanish. Charlie, Anne's husband, began to waver under the weight of official certainty. The police had been so definitive. Could it be possible? Could their daughter have simply walked away from everything? One evening, he turned to Anne and asked whether she truly believed Julie was still out there somewhere. Anne looked at him and said, "Not a chance. Not ever." What nobody understood yet, what no investigator had considered, was that Julie had not walked away from anything. She had not caught a train to London. She had not started over in some distant city. She had not abandoned her son Maud by choice. Julie Hogg had never left that house on Grange Avenue. She was still inside it. And for 80 days, while her mother fought to be heard, while officers filed their reports and sealed their folders, while the gray English winter settled over Billingham like a held breath. Julie remained exactly where she had been hidden, in the silence beneath the ordinary, waiting for the one person who refused to stop searching: her mother. 4 days of phone calls finally broke through the wall of institutional indifference. On the 20th of November 1989, Cleveland police agreed to conduct a formal search of Julie Hogg's home on Grange Avenue. They did not send 2 officers. They sent 29. For 5 consecutive days, a team moved through that small terraced house. They opened cupboards, checked wardrobes, pulled back furniture. They examined the kitchen, the living room, the bedrooms. They went upstairs and downstairs and upstairs again. In a property no larger than most council homes on Teesside, nearly 30 trained professionals spent a full working week looking for any sign of what had happened to Julie Hogg. They found nothing. No evidence of a disturbance, no trace of foul play, no indication that anything violent had occurred within those walls. At the end of 5 days, one officer looked Ann Ming in the eye and delivered a sentence she would carry like a scar for the rest of her life. He told her he could guarantee that nothing untoward had happened in that house. Guarantee. Not suspect. Not believe. Guarantee. Julie was officially classified as a missing person. The file was closed with the quiet efficiency of a system that had already made up its mind. A young woman from Billingham had walked out on her life. Case resolved. Resources redirected. Move on. But Anne could not move on. She and Charlie were now raising Kevin full-time, feeding him breakfast each morning, answering the questions a toddler asks when his mother simply stops appearing. "Where's Mummy? When is she coming back?" Anne absorbed every one of those questions without an answer to give, because the people whose job it was to find answers had stopped looking. December arrived. Then January. The rest of Billingham carried on. Christmas lights went up and came down. The new decade turned. 1990 began with frost on the windows and silence from the police. Anne kept calling the station. Not every few days. Every day. She had become, in the eyes of the officers who fielded her calls, a nuisance. A grieving mother who could not accept the obvious. But Anne was not grieving, because grief requires a body. Grief requires certainty. What Anne carried was something far worse. She carried not knowing, and not knowing, combined with the absolute conviction that the official explanation was wrong, yet is a kind of torment that does not fade with time. It sharpens. She asked the same questions on a loop, not because she had forgotten the answers, but because no one had ever given her real ones. Why would Julie leave without Kevin? Why would she vanish the morning of a court hearing she had fought to arrange? Why would a woman walk away from everything she owned with no money, no bag, and no coat? The silence that answered those questions was not empty. It was full of something no one was ready to face. The smell arrived before the truth did. In early February of 1990, Julie's estranged husband, Andrew, received the keys to the Grange Avenue house from police. He planned to move back in with young Kevin. But the moment he stepped inside, something stopped him. A faint, sour heaviness hung in the air upstairs. Not overpowering, but just persistent. The kind of odor that sits at the edge of perception. Impossible to place, but impossible to ignore. Andrew called Anne. She arrived expecting a plumbing issue, a dead rodent in the walls, something ordinary. She climbed the stairs, and the scent thickened with every step. It pooled in the bathroom, hovering low and close, clinging to the tiles and grout. Anne had spent years working as a theater nurse. She had been in operating rooms. She had been around things most people never encounter, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a recognition stirred that she desperately wanted to be wrong about. She leaned against the wall beside the bathtub, trying to locate the source. Her knee pressed against the bath panel, the plastic board running along the side of the tub. It shifted. Loose. She pulled it away. But what she found behind it ended one nightmare and began another that would last 17 years. Julie was there, hidden in the narrow space beneath the bathtub. She had been there since November. Through every phone call Anne had made, through every search the police had conducted, through 5 days of 29 officers walking directly past this bathroom, stepping over this floor, standing inches from this panel. Julie had never left Grange Avenue. She had been concealed in the one place no one thought to look, tucked into a gap so tight it seemed impossible that a person could fit inside it. 80 days. That is how long it took. Not because the evidence was hidden in some distant location, not because the killer had been clever enough to transport the body elsewhere, but because the people tasked with finding her had walked past her again and again, and never once removed a single panel from the side of a bathtub. Anne's scream brought Andrew running. Within the hour, Grange Avenue was sealed off with police tape. The same officers who had guaranteed nothing had happened in that house now returned to process what they had missed. The forensic examination would later determine that Julie had been strangled. She had been subjected to a violent assault before being hidden beneath the bath and covered. For Anne, the discovery was not just the end of searching. It was the beginning of a question that would consume her for years. How does a mother find what 29 trained officers could not? How does a body remain hidden in a house that was officially cleared? And the most haunting question of all. Yet if Anne had not come that day, would anyone have ever found her daughter? Billy Dunlop was not a stranger. That is what made it worse. He was not some shadowy figure who drifted into Billingham unnoticed. He was local, known, familiar to police long before Julie Hogg's name ever appeared in a case file. A laborer by trade, a violent man by pattern, Dunlop had built a reputation across Teesside that preceded him into every pub and every police interview room he ever entered. Within hours of Julie's body being discovered, investigators began reconstructing the night of the 15th of November, 1989, the night before Julie was last heard from, and the trail led directly to Dunlop. That evening, he had been drinking heavily at a strip show held at the Billingham Rugby Club. As the night wore on, a brawl erupted. Dunlop was at the center of it. The violence was severe enough to send another man to hospital. Dunlop himself walked away with visible injuries to his face, a swollen eye that would become a detail repeated in every account of what happened next. After being discharged, Dunlop did not go home to sleep it off. He went to Julie's house. He knew her. They lived in the same neighborhood. A friend of his lived directly next door on Grange Avenue. By some accounts, Dunlop and Julie had been briefly intimate in the weeks before that night. He showed up at her door, drunk, bruised, and volatile. What happened inside that house would not be fully detailed until years later, when Dunlop himself described it. But the forensic evidence recovered in February 1990 painted a clear enough picture. Julie had been strangled. She had been subjected to a violent assault. And afterward, her body had been hidden beneath the bathtub with a level of deliberate concealment that suggested not panic, but calculation. When police searched Dunlop's home, they found Julie's house keys hidden beneath his floorboards, the keys she would have needed to lock her own front door, the keys that explained how the house had been sealed from the inside with no sign of forced entry, The very detail that had led officers to assume Julie had simply walked out on her own. An inquest held in October of 1990 confirmed the cause of death as strangulation. Dunlop was arrested and charged with murder. For Anne Ming, the arrest felt like the first honest thing the system had done since November. The man who had taken Julie was behind bars. The evidence was mounting. Justice, but at last, seemed to be approaching. But what Anne did not yet understand was that catching a killer and convicting one are two entirely different things. The 80 days that Julie's body had spent hidden beneath that bathtub had not just stolen a proper farewell. They had eroded the very evidence needed to hold her killer accountable. The delay that began with police incompetence was about to deliver its cruelest consequence yet. And Billy Dunlop knew it. They had his DNA. They had Julie's keys hidden beneath his floorboards. They had witnesses who placed him in the area on the night she disappeared. And still, it was not enough. In May of 1991, Billy Dunlop stood trial for the murder of Julie Hogg. The prosecution presented what appeared to be a compelling case. Forensic analysis had linked Dunlop to the blanket in which Julie's body had been wrapped. The house keys recovered from his home explained how the front door had been locked without any sign of forced entry. His history of violence was documented. His proximity to Julie that night was established. But Dunlop had something working in his favor that no amount of evidence could easily overcome. Time. 80 days between the killing and the discovery had allowed decomposition to advance to a point where certain forensic conclusions became difficult to draw with precision. The physical evidence, while damning in combination, carried individual gaps that a defense team could exploit. And in a courtroom, reasonable doubt lives in the spaces between certainty. Dunlop took the stand and denied everything. He offered alternative explanations. He challenged timelines. He exploited every fracture the delay had created in the prosecution's case. The jury deliberated. They could not agree. A mistrial was declared. A second trial was ordered for later that year. The prosecution returned with the same evidence, the same witnesses, the same argument. Dunlop returned with the same denial, and the result was identical. 12 new jurors sat in the same courtroom, heard the same facts, and once again failed to reach a unanimous verdict. Under English law at the time, when two juries could not decide, the Crown was expected to offer no further evidence. And so, in a procedural conclusion that felt more like a quiet surrender, a formal not guilty verdict was recorded against Billy Dunlop. He walked out of court a free man. Anne Ming sat in the gallery and watched it happen. She had found her daughter's body with her own hands. She had handed police a suspect who lived minutes from the crime scene. She had waited through months of legal preparation, trusting that the system would finish what she had started. And the system had folded. Twice. The acquittal did not just free Dunlop. It activated a legal principle that had existed in English common law for over 800 years. Double jeopardy. Once formally acquitted, a person could never be tried again for the same offense. No matter what new evidence emerged, no matter what the accused said or did afterward. The verdict was final. Absolute. Irreversible. Billy Dunlop was now legally untouchable for the murder of Julie Hogg. He knew it. The police knew it. And Anne Ming, sitting in that courtroom with the weight of 2 failed trials pressing down on her chest, knew it too. But she did not accept it. Freedom did not make Billy Dunlop quieter. It made him worse. With a formal acquittal shielding him from ever being tried again, he returned to Billingham, and picked up exactly where his violence had left off. Only now, he carried something new. Certainty. The certainty that the law could not touch him. And that certainty made him reckless. He drank heavily. He raged openly. His partner at the time lived in constant fear of what he might do next. On more than one occasion, Dunlop grabbed her by the throat and whispered words that turned her blood cold. He told her he had done it before. He told her he had gotten away with it. The threat was not hypothetical. It was a reference. It delivered with the calm confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. Eventually, she fled. She took the children and severed all contact. But even distance was not enough to feel safe from a man who wielded his past like a weapon. In 1997, Dunlop's violence caught up with him again. He was convicted of a brutal assault on his pregnant girlfriend and her partner. The attack was savage enough to earn him a 7-year prison sentence. And it was behind those walls, away from the pubs and streets where he had built his reputation, that Dunlop made the decision that would eventually unravel everything. He confessed. Not quietly, not reluctantly, not in the cautious whisper of a man burdened by guilt. Dunlop told a prison officer exactly what he had done to Julie Hogg. He described how he had gone to her house that night, how she had rejected him, how he had killed her, and how he had hidden her body beneath the bathtub before locking the door behind him and walking away into the dark of a November evening. He spoke freely because he believed that no confession could change his legal status. He had been acquitted. Double jeopardy protected him. He could stand on the roof of that prison and shout what he had done, and no court in England could retry him for it. And he was right. At that moment, under the law as it stood, Billy Dunlop had committed the perfect murder. He did not keep the confession private. Back on the streets of Teesside during earlier stretches of freedom, he had already boasted about it in pubs and bars. People in Billingham knew. Neighbors knew. The community knew. Yet no one could do a thing about it, because the law said the matter was settled. But there was one detail Dunlop had failed to account for. The prison officer he confessed to had not simply listened. He had recorded it. Every word, every detail, every boast, captured and preserved. The confession existed. It was irrefutable. And it was now in the hands of people who would spend years figuring out how to use it. One of those people was Anne Ming. The confession was real. It was recorded. It was detailed. And it meant absolutely nothing under the law. Prosecutors delivered the news to Anne Ming with the grim precision of people who had run out of options. Because Billy Dunlop had been formally acquitted, the double jeopardy rule made retrial impossible. He could confess on national television, and it would not matter. But the legal door was shut, bolted, and it had been that way since the Magna Carta. The only charge they could bring was perjury. Dunlop had lied under oath during his 2 murder trials. With his own confession now contradicting his sworn testimony, the case was straightforward. In April of 2000, he was convicted of 2 counts of perjury and sentenced to 6 years for lying about a murder he had now openly admitted committing. Anne sat through the sentencing and felt something shift inside her. Not defeat, something harder, something more dangerous to the system than grief ever could be. She decided that if the law refused to deliver justice for Julie, she would dismantle the law and rebuild it. What followed was a campaign that most people would have abandoned within months. Anne wrote letters, hundreds of them, and she contacted her local member of parliament. She reached out to the Crown Prosecution Service. She requested meetings with the Lord Chancellor, the Attorney General, and 2 successive Home Secretaries. She gave interviews to anyone who would listen. She told Julie's story in living rooms and newsrooms and parliamentary offices, repeating the same facts with the same calm fury until the people in power could no longer pretend they had not heard her. She was not a lawyer or a politician. She was a retired theater nurse from a village near Stockton-on-Tees, and she was challenging a legal principle that had survived for over 8 centuries. The campaign was lonely. There were years when nothing moved, years when doors closed before she could finish a sentence. But Anne had one advantage that no institution could outlast. She could not be discouraged. She could not be redirected. And she absolutely could not be silenced. Her timing, though born of tragedy, eventually aligned with a broader political shift. Other high-profile cases were raising similar questions about the finality of acquittals. The government published a white paper on justice reform. Parliamentary committees began reviewing the double jeopardy rule. And at the center of every conversation about why the law needed to change was the name Julie Hogg, kept alive not by headlines or legal scholars, but by her mother. In 2003, Parliament passed the Criminal Justice Act. A new provision allowed retrials in cases where new and compelling evidence emerged after acquittal. The law came into force in April of 2005. For the first time in over 800 years, the shield Billy Dunlop had been hiding behind no longer existed. For 15 years, Billy Dunlop had lived inside a loophole. He had walked through it in 1991 when 2 juries failed to convict him. He had stretched out inside it when he boasted in pubs across Teesside. He had leaned against it when he confessed to a prison officer without a flicker of concern. The double jeopardy rule was not just his defense, it was his identity. He was the man who got away with it, and the law itself had signed his permission slip. Then, in 2005, that permission expired. The Criminal Justice Act that Anne Ming had spent years fighting to bring into existence contained a provision that changed everything. If new and compelling evidence emerged after an acquittal, the Court of Appeal could quash the original verdict and order a retrial. The provision was retrospective. It applied to cases already concluded. Cases exactly like Julie Hogg's. Prosecutors moved quickly. The recorded confession Dunlop had given to a prison officer years earlier formed the backbone of their application. Combined with his perjury convictions, which proved he had lied under oath during both original trials, the case for reopening was strong. In June of 2006, the Court of Appeal reviewed the evidence and delivered its ruling. The confession was new and compelling. The acquittal was quashed. A retrial was ordered. Billy Dunlop became the first person in English legal history to face a murder charge, after being formally acquitted of the same crime. 800 years of precedent had been overturned, and he was standing on the wrong side of it. The news reached Anne Ming at her home near Stockton-on-Tees. She had been waiting for this moment for over 16 years. Since the morning she broke into Julie's house and found it too clean. Since the afternoon her knee hit a loose bath panel. Since the day she watched a jury fail to convict the man she knew had killed her daughter. Every letter she had written, every MP she had confronted, every door that had been closed in her face had led to this single legal sentence. Retrial ordered. But Anne did not celebrate. She had been failed too many times to trust a system on the basis of a ruling alone. She needed to see Dunlop inside a courtroom again. She needed to hear the word that had been denied to her family for nearly 2 decades. Guilty. Dunlop, meanwhile, understood what was coming. But the recorded confession left no room for the denials that had carried him through 2 previous trials. The perjury convictions had already proven he was a liar. The forensic evidence, though degraded by time, was no longer the prosecution's only weapon. His own words were now the most damning exhibit in the case. For the first time since 1989, Billy Dunlop had nowhere to hide. The courtroom was waiting, and so was Ann Ming. 17 years. That is how long Ann Ming waited to hear a single word spoken inside a courtroom. 17 years of phone calls unanswered, letters unread, and doors that closed before she could finish speaking. 17 years of watching the man who killed her daughter walk free and hurt others without consequence. All of it compressed into the silence before a plea. In September of 2006, Billy Dunlop stood inside the Old Bailey. The same man who had denied everything during 2 previous trials. The same man who had confessed in prison because he believed no law on earth could touch him. The same man who had threatened women with the words, "I've done it before and got away with it." He stood in the most famous criminal court in England, and this time, there was no jury to deadlock, no gap in the forensic evidence to exploit, no 800-year-old legal shield to crouch behind. His own recorded voice had already told the world what he had done. His perjury convictions proved he lied under oath. The Court of Appeal had ruled the evidence compelling enough to quash his acquittal. Every escape route he had ever relied on had been sealed shut one by one, but by a woman he had never taken seriously. Dunlop pleaded guilty to the murder of Julie Hogg. Anne was in the courtroom. So was Charlie. They had traveled from Teesside to London to witness the moment the system finally acknowledged what Anne had known since February of 1990, when her knee hit that bath panel and the truth spilled out of the dark. The prosecutor described what had been done to Julie that night in November. He told the court that the overwhelming inference was that Julie had rejected Dunlop and had been subjected to a violent assault as a result. Anne wept as the details were read aloud, not because they were new to her. She had carried them in silence for almost 2 decades, but because someone was finally saying them in a place where they mattered. The judge sentenced Dunlop to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 17 years. Anne listened to the sentence and said afterward that she wished life meant life. Julie's murder had devastated the family and left them in permanent turmoil. No tariff, no minimum term, no number of years would give them back what had been taken. But something had been achieved that went beyond the sentencing of one man. Billy Dunlop was the first person in English legal history to be convicted of murder after a previous acquittal for the same crime. The precedent Anne had fought to create did not end with Julie. It opened the door for more than a dozen future convictions under the reformed double jeopardy law, including cases that had gone cold for decades. One mother from Teesside had rewritten 800 years of legal history, but not with wealth or influence, with refusal. Billy Dunlop received a minimum term of 17 years. Ann Ming received a life sentence the day she found her daughter behind a bath panel, and no judge has ever been able to set an end date for hers. In 2007, Anne was awarded a Member of the Order of the British Empire for her services to the criminal justice system. The honor recognized what the courts had taken nearly 2 decades to acknowledge: that a theater nurse from Teesside, armed with nothing but conviction and a refusal to be dismissed, had reshaped the legal landscape of an entire nation. Dunlop's minimum term expired in September of 2021. Since then, the fight has shifted from courtroom to parole board. In 2019, Dunlop applied to be transferred to an open prison, but the request was denied. In 2022, a parole panel recommended the transfer. The Justice Secretary blocked it. In 2025, another panel made the same recommendation. Once again, the Secretary of State refused. Anne, now approaching 80, has attended every hearing. She has read victim impact statements through video links. She has reminded every panel of what Dunlop did, not just to Julie, but to every woman he harmed after walking free. The partner he threatened, the pregnant girlfriend he attacked in 1997. The pattern that did not begin or end with Julie Hogg. Her grandson Kevin, the toddler who was with his grandparents the night his mother was killed, has grown into a man who stands beside Anne at every hearing. He was 2 years old when Julie disappeared, yet everything he carries of her comes through photographs, stories, and the fierce determination of a grandmother who refused to let her daughter become a forgotten file in a police archive. Anne once said she would be one step behind Dunlop for the rest of her life, like her daughter's ghost, a constant reminder of what he had done. She has kept that promise with a consistency that borders on devotion. Julie Hogg was 22 years old. She worked nights delivering pizzas to support her son. She was building a new life after separating from her husband. She had plans and a court date the morning after she was killed. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to watch Kevin become the man he is. What she deserved every ordinary Tuesday morning and every unremarkable Sunday afternoon that was stolen from her in a few minutes of violence on a dark November night. She did not get any of that. But because of her mother, she got something the system tried to deny her. Justice. Anne Ming spent 17 years refusing to be silent. The least we can do is make sure her daughter's story is never forgotten. Hit that like button. Not for us. For Julie. And subscribe. Because behind every cold case is someone still waiting for the truth to come home.